Hello, guys. Welcome to the show. I'm glad to have you guys here. Now, I'm going to tell you what. I'm back home. I'm thankful to be back home. I'm going to tell you it was a rough flight. It really was a rough flight. Hit a headwind all the way across the Atlantic. It's kind of rough. Anyway, today is Monday, February 18th, 2019, and I'm going to tell you what. Cryptocurrency's starting to pop up again a little bit. Starting to get a little bit of energy behind it, I think. We'll have to wait and see if this continues or if we're still in the bear market. But, I think this energy is actually coming from the fact that the Fed is talking about ending their quantitative tightening program, which is going to mean monetary stimulus to infinity, basically what it means. And there's another really important thing happening I really want to talk to you guys about here. It's extremely important. It goes back to the fundamentals of how the banks got started in the first place. Okay, going back to when the bankers actually started. They used to be goldsmiths. And what they did was they took people's gold, and people did not want to keep their gold under their bed anymore because, let's face it, if you had a bag of gold under your bed, your neighbor, while you're away having something to eat, and you're all fancy and you got your nice clothes and everything, and you're rich and he's not, because you got the bag of gold and he doesn't. He's got a bag of copper coins and you got gold coins. He sneaks into your house, takes your bag of gold. Now he's rich and you're poor. Okay? So the goldsmiths set themselves up with a vault and they said, okay, we'll keep everybody's gold. But what they did was they took your gold in and then they gave you a paper certificate saying that you own the gold. Well, people started to trade those paper certificates. This was how fiat money was born. But the bankers, they became bankers. The goldsmiths back then in those days used to create more paper certificates than they actually had gold in the vault. And they were aware of the fact that most people would not come in with their paper certificates. They would use the paper certificates in trade instead. And so once in a great while, everybody would come in with their paper certificates and want their gold. The goldsmiths didn't have it because they created more paper certificates than they had gold in the vault. In other words, they were a bunch of crooks running a scheme. It's the same way with the bankers today. They've been running this scheme for a long time now. But there's something new here. There's something very important I want to point out to you guys that's happening, and most people are not noticing it. And so we're going to get started. We're going to open up the charts right here, and we're going to get right in there and take a look first at Bitcoin. Bitcoin's taken several leaps upwards. If we go back to the 2-hour chart, let's go back and try the 2-hour. No, we're going to have to go back farther back, 6-hour. When we go back to the 6-hour, we can see a couple of pops here where it's popped up, and now it's popped up again. And she's rising, If we go to the 1 minute, we can see, and we back up, we can see this rise we had today. And it's maintaining these rises in price. That's the important part. So right now it's at 37.94 and holding it. And it's looking good, boys. It's looking good. Now, next thing we want to look at is this story right here about J.P. Morgan. J.P. Morgan has launched the first U.S.-backed crypto coin. Banked by a bank. Banked by his own bank. He's launched it. And they're going to use it in the bank, inside the bank, between people who, I guess, are high up within the bank will be able to transfer money instantaneously to one another with this new technology, which is basically blockchain technology. So it's an interbank coin where the bank can send money to other banks, and people within the bank that have big accounts can send money. It's for select people within the bank. But this is what people are not noticing about all this. This is exactly the same racket that made the banks rich in the first place. This is just like the gold paper certificates. It's exactly the same thing. Because if you look here, if you look down on this article a little bit, it says that the JPM coin is going to be 1-to-1 redeemable in fiat currency held by JP Morgan. Now, when most people read that, they say to themselves, okay, they're going to create, say, $100 million worth of these JP Morgan coins. And they're going to have $1 in the bank to satisfy every one of those JP Morgan coins. That's what most people think. That's what you'd think when you read that. The JPM coin is 1-to-1 redeemable in fiat. That's what people think. They think, hey, the banks are going to have on hand the exact same amount of fiat that they need to cover each one of these new coins that they create. That's what most people think. But I know why. I was reading this article, thinking about this for a minute. I know why that they're only going to be testing these prototypes. It says JPM coin is currently a prototype that will be tested with a small number of JP Morgan's institutional clients. I know why they're testing it that way. They want to see what percentage of JPM coins that they have to hold fiat to. In other words, they're going to see how the coin starts moving back and forth and how much fiat that they have to hold in order to satisfy demand for these movements of these coins. That's what they're going to do. They're probably going to find out that it's around 10%. So they have to hold 10% fiat in order to transfer these coins. Because what they're going to find out is that most people are going to be perfectly happy to transfer these coins and just settle fiat probably equal to about 10% or less, maybe even 5% of the actual amount of coins. So you know what this means, don't you? Most banks, in order to create new money through the fractional reserve system, have to lend money to somebody who's ready to borrow. Okay, so they have to find a qualified borrower to lend money to, and then they create money that way through fractional reserve banking. In other words, they give the guy the money that he's borrowing, and they just create it from thin air by a book entry into their ledger, bank ledger. So they've just created the money. But the problem now is this system is so over-leveraged that nobody's borrowing any money anymore. They've saturated everything. The bankers have saturated everything. Nobody's borrowing any money. So no new money is being created because that's the most powerful money creation. More powerful than the Fed is fractional reserve banking. The banks have been creating all this money. And this is why we've been descending a little bit toward deflation, is because the banks aren't lending out like they used to, because the market is saturated. Everybody's borrowed all they can borrow. They're up to here with borrowing. Their credit cards are all maxed out. There's nothing going on, and it's getting worse. And so the banks can't make any money because they make money through borrowing out. But here's the thing. If all the banks start getting these new coins, and say JP Morgan decides to create $100 million of these coins, in order for him to redeem these coins on a 1-to-1 fiat currency basis, like it says here, JPM coin is going to be 1-to-1 redeemable in fiat, they're only going to have to keep 5 or 10% of the fiat actually on hand. Because it's the same way with everybody out there. People leave their money in their account. People never come in and say, okay, I want all my cash now. Because if everybody did that, the cash wouldn't be there. But it's going to be the same way with these coins. Most people are just going to leave these coins in their account and they're not going to transfer them. They're probably only going to need 5 or 10% of fiat on hand to cover the amount of coins they have available. This means that JP Morgan can create $100 million worth of these coins and probably only have to have on hand $10 million worth of fiat to cover the transactions. This is money creation again. But the beauty of this is for the bankers is they do not have to have a lender, a borrower to borrow money. They can now create these coins and leverage the system. And there's no end to how many different coins that they can create. He could have a JPM coin. He could have a JPP coin. The same bank could have 10 different coins of 10 different values, all running on blockchain, and only have 1/10 in reserve to cover each one of these coins of actual fiat. Now, you get one bank doing this, okay. But what if you get all these banks, and even it starts to spread, and what you're going to be doing is you're going to be increasing the fiat monetary supply ultimately, but in reserves of coins. In other words, It's given the power to the banks that the Federal Reserve has. Money creation tool to be able to create money without lending it out. Right now, the banks have been restricted. They've been restricted because they have to have a qualified borrower to borrow money in order to create money. This is going to give them the opportunity to create money, bypass the middleman, just to go into straight money creation by just creating endless amounts of different coins and setting a value on the coins equal in fiat that they don't have anyway. This also increases, I mean, all the banks can get out of debt this way, for crying out loud. If this spreads, I mean, Deutsche Bank could get themselves out of debt just by creating 100 billion Deutsche Bank coins. And they only need to have a small reserve on hand to cover it all, because it's the same thing as the fractional reserve system. They're very clever, these bankers. They're very sneaky and very clever, but ultimately, what's the end result? The end result is increasing, again, the fiat monetary supply, because when a person goes to that particular bank with these JPM coins, and they say, okay, I've got $10 million worth of these JPM coins, you know, their account says that they have $10 million. Suddenly, it increases the wealth effect. Suddenly, it increases the fiat monetary supply. Just like that. Okay, so that's one of the reasons why I find this interesting, because first we see a bank in Japan doing it. Now we see a bank here in America doing it. One of the biggest banks, JP Morgan Bank. Soon, all the other banks are to follow, with hundreds of different coins related to different banks. Here it comes, boys. The door's been opened. Who's going to shut it now? Thank you guys for listening, and we'll catch you in the next report. Bye-bye, guys.